Metabolic recovery does not just imply a state of rest, although it is a part of it. It is an active biological process that's happening on the inside, and carbohydrate quality has a direct and measurable role in how efficiently recovery occurs. Caballero Garcia and others 2022 suggest that any physical activity involves an increase in metabolism and the functionality of the functional systems of our body. Additionally, we understand that our body operates within a regulated internal environment. In this context, metabolic recovery refers to the restoration of physiological balance following physiological or psychological stress, the return to homeostasis across cellular, hormonal, and neurological systems. Homeostasis means balance. For example, our body goes through physical stress as an outcome of physical training. Depending on the intensity of activity, the stress response is a part of the repair and build process. Regardless of whether the stress comes from a heavy workout or other physiological states, the underlying biological goals of metabolic recovery remain similar. It is the scale of the stress that alters how the body executes that recovery, because the effects of the stress dictate the required scope of the recovery. It is suggested, in a transient stress state such as exercise, disruption is controlled and time-limited. So this recovery follows the body's standard physiological sequence, proceeding toward those three core objectives without deviation from healthy baseline function. The three objectives are replenishing energy, rebuilding, and returning to the new baseline. By default, the body is equipped to self-regulate. The question is under what conditions the capacity is maintained or compromised, and we explore a few factors that may compromise these recovery mechanisms. Also, does it matter for long-term health because training and recovery are not independent, rather interdependent? To define self-regulation refers to the body's intrinsic capacity to sense its current state, energy availability, nutrient status, stress level, tissue damage, and automatically adjust metabolic processes to restore balance. Two primary factors can disrupt this process: diet quality and prolonged physiological stress. Frequent or high-load stress disturbs autonomic balance. The autonomic nervous system, as we know, is a vast network that governs every organ in the body and is responsible for maintaining equilibrium between activation and recovery. It includes the sympathetic, fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, the rest and digest state. When that balance is repeatedly loaded beyond its self-regulatory capacity, for example, sympathetic activity supersedes the state of balance frequently, the internal environment shifts. The body responds with elevated cortisol and adrenaline. These stress hormones accelerate muscle protein breakdown, drive fatigue, and delay recovery, creating an environment where broader dysregulation becomes more probable over time. Although acute stress and cortisol elevation are adaptive, whereby the body's self-regulation handles this effectively, it's chronic elevation that drives the breakdown. Similarly, Daniel M. and others, 2022, indicate that cardiac autonomic recovery following a single training session takes up to 24 hours for low-intensity exercise, 24 to 48 hours at threshold intensity, and at least 48 hours after high-intensity effort. This is a foundational recovery variable, not a minor consideration. So, if we recognize diet, and specifically complex carbohydrates, sources suggest that complex carbohydrates promote sympathetic downregulation by stabilizing blood sugar and modulating the gut-brain axis. This is where diet can make a difference. Dietary carbohydrate quality becomes directly relevant. Complex carbohydrates help down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system, the body's stress response, shifting the physiological state toward parasympathetic, anabolic conditions. The mechanisms are measurable. Complex carbohydrates stimulate insulin secretion, which directly suppresses cortisol activity and inhibits the proteolytic pathways, which is protein degrading, responsible for muscle protein breakdown. Blunted cortisol release reduces protein catabolism, sustained glucose delivery restores muscle glycogen, and reduces central nervous system fatigue. Via the gut-brain axis, dietary fiber from complex carbohydrate sources supports short-chain fatty acid synthesis, which regulates neuroinflammation and contributes to central nervous system recovery. For example, when complex carbs maintain steady glucose and insulin, your body's self-regulatory systems can accurately sense energy is stable and therefore suppress the muscle breakdown signals. If you rely on simple sugars with sharp spikes and crashes, these feedback systems may become disrupted. They receive contradictory signals, feast, famine, feast, making it difficult to maintain the steady state required for effective recovery. Aligning with holistic sciences and the current-day recognition, it is likely that carbohydrate quality, rather than quantity in isolation, is a meaningful lever in metabolic recovery with direct downstream effects on autonomic balance, muscle repair, and long-term physiological adaptability. Based on individual suitability and health status. Subscribe for more weekly segments. Go deeper with holistic high-performance health.